Welcome, I'm Tatiana Darzi. On May 30th, Chinese critic poet Wang Zang, who supported the umbrella movement, was arrested from home along with his wife. Their bank cards, IDs, and passports were also raided. His wife was released the following day, but she doesn't know of her husband's whereabouts. Since 2014, they have been monitored by the C.C.P. Before their arrest, the family was watched around the clock.
As the sensitive day of June 4th approaches, on May 30th, a mainland poet, Wang Zang, and his wife were arrested from home by the police and their house was raided. Wang Zang's wife was released in the early hours of the following day, while Wang Zang's whereabouts remained unknown. Before his capture, Wang Zang's family was under 24-hour strict surveillance and was followed by undercover police when they went out. On the 31st, Wang Li, real name Wang Liqin, wife of the mainland poet Wang Zang, sent a message asking people to help Wang Zang, saying that at 4:30 p.m. on the 30th, more than 20 people came into their house, and probably another 20 to 30 people waited outside. Police took her away along with Wang Zang. She was taken to the police station in Chuxiong and was not released home until the early morning of the 31st. As for Wang Zang, his whereabouts are still unknown. She returned home and found her family's bank cards, ID cards, Wang Zang's passport, various other important documents, as well as her and Wang Zang's cell phones were all taken. There's 4 people at home guarding us right now, and there's also a police car at the gate of my residential neighborhood. Ni Yulan, a Beijing-based human rights advocate concerned about Wang Zang's arrest, said that with 4 children to take care of at home while with her bank cards taken away, Wang Zang will face a difficult life.
Wang Zang was arrested along with his wife. His wife was then released. Their home was raided. Their bank cards and cell phones were all taken. They have 4 kids in the family. Some are in elementary school. Some are still in kindergarten. How are they going to survive if their bank accounts are frozen?
Prior to Wang Zang's arrest, the family was under strict 24-hour surveillance. There are videos from the 24th and 25th on Twitter showing Wang Zang and Wang Li being followed by multiple plainclothes police officers. In one video, Wang Zang expressed his complaints.
中国云南省楚雄州楚雄市的警察我们没违法犯罪守着我们几个月不说，去到哪跟到哪。
那天是8个24小时
这是法治社会吗？请问，请全世界的朋友、全世界的公民看看，这是中国的法治社会吗？
Ni Yulan expressed that the CCP authorities began to closely monitor politically sensitive people, such as dissidents and human rights activists, prior to the 2 sessions.
They place you under arrest for subversion of state power. But no matter what crime they arrest you for, they always give you extra security. I think this has something to do with June 4th. Now, prisoners in Beijing are all being watched. They're not free to go anywhere. They're all being watched prior to China's annual parliamentary meetings. You'll have to wait till June 4th for them to loosen their watch.
Born after the 1980s and considered China's youngest critic poet, Wang Zang, whose real name is Wang Yuwen, is the author of several poetry collections. He was arrested in October 2014 for voicing his support online to the Hong Kong umbrella movement and was released in July 2015. Wang Zang was threatened and expelled by the police while living in Beijing and was forced to move his house multiple times. In 2017, his wife, Wang Li, developed a mental disorder due to stress, and the family moved back to their hometown in Yunnan.
Huang Xirui, an award-winning Chinese photojournalist, recently protested for freedom of the press in front of the Chinese consulate in Los Angeles. He stated that whenever freelance journalists post news and photos on the internet, Chinese or international websites or social media platforms, it triggers CCP's regime's national security alert and they get blocked and harassed as a result.
Chinese journalists from mainland China gathered in front of the Chinese consulate in Los Angeles, California, to protest for freedom of the press. This protest is to call the attention of people from around the world to oppose the CCP's crackdown on journalists' freedom to report the news honestly. Huang Xirui is a freelance journalist from Hunan Province, China, and has been working as a photojournalist for 5 years. Recently, he protested in front of the Chinese consulate because there is no freedom of the press in China.
Whenever we, the freelance journalists, post news or photographs on the internet, on social media or on foreign websites, it gets the attention of the national security. I have received many calls like this.
Huang won third place in the News Events category for iPhone Photography Awards in 2017 for his photo, taken in January 2016 during clashes between Turkish government forces and PKK militants at the old district Sur Diyarbakir. He believes that the reason why his social media was blocked by the CCP was because this photo involved sensitive information.
The fact that these types of photos are not allowed to be published on Chinese media platforms means that I, as an ordinary citizen, am being blocked by an organization like the CCP when all I want to do is to speak out for humanity.
Huang explained that the CCP continues to enslave the Chinese people because many of them are unable to distinguish the difference between the Chinese Communist Party and the country itself. He hopes that the people can be brave enough to stand up for their basic rights.
No matter what happens to me in the future, I will remain in this profession for the rest of my life. I will be a freelance photographer no matter how much the CCP tries to persecute me or how much they suppress me.
President Trump signed an executive order to prevent social media companies practicing selective censorship, restricting freedom of speech and expression, using fact-checking as an excuse. These companies and platforms also help the Chinese regime promoting propaganda and spreading disinformation.
U.S. President Trump signed an executive order on May 28th to stop social media companies from using fact checks as an excuse to restrict freedom of expression while allowing the CCP to promote its propaganda. White House spokesperson McEnany said on May 28th that Facebook and Twitter are profiting from and promoting the spread of disinformation from the CCP. Trump said in the executive order that Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube wield immense, if not unprecedented, power to shape the interpretation of public events, to censor, delete, or disappear information, and to control what people see or do not see. Twitter now selectively decides to place a warning label on certain tweets in a manner that clearly reflects political bias. He criticized some social media companies for helping the CCP promote false information for profit. Trump posted multiple tweets on May 29th, criticizing Twitter for ignoring the propaganda of the CCP and the radical left. His tweet said, "What about all of the lies and fraudulent statements made by Adam Schiff and so many others on the Russian witch hunt plus? What about China's propaganda? WHO's mistakes? No flags?" On May 29th, Twitter once again placed a warning label on Trump's tweet. White House spokesperson McEnany criticized Facebook and Twitter for suppressing freedom of speech and allowing Chinese officials to disseminate false information about the pandemic's origins.
So they appear to be very hastily eager to censor President Trump and some of his employees, but a little reluctant when it comes to China.
Health officials tested 6.5 million people in Wuhan for the CCP virus. This massive screening was done in a period of 10 days. According to a Wuhan resident who chose to remain anonymous, said that asymptomatic carriers of the virus are not counted as carriers. The CCP will count patients as being infected only if their symptoms of coronavirus were displayed.
Wuhan health officials recently claimed to have sampled more than 9 million people for the CCP virus and tested more than 6.5 million, and only found one confirmed case. In a May 26th article, the New York Times questioned how Wuhan managed to test 6.5 million people in 10 days. The Hubei Daily reported on May 26 that Wuhan has been conducting a citywide nucleic acid test since May 15th, and as of May 24th, more than 9 million people had been sampled and more than 6.5 million tested. The city of Wuhan, which has a population of more than 11 million, continued to see an increase in the number of people infected with the CCP virus even after the city lifted its citywide lockdown on April 8th. As a result, the city launched a 10-day nucleic acid mass screening. The Wuhan Municipal Health Commission said on May 25th that the mass screening was coming to an end, having detected a total of 218 asymptomatic cases and only one that had turned into a confirmed case. Yet, Caixin Media reported on May 12th that Wuhan conducted a serologic test in April, sampled from 11,000 people, and found that about 5 to 6% of them had come up positive, which means that at least 550,000 to 660,000 people in Wuhan would have been infected with the CCP virus. a Wuhan citizen who asked to remain anonymous told NTD that all of the Wuhan data is fabricated. He learned that of the 11,000 people that were sampled, 30% were found to be asymptomatic carriers, and the 11,000 test subjects were people who had stayed at home and never went out.
Here, we don't consider these patients who turned out to be positive as systematic carriers as being confirmed cases. However, in other countries, as long as a case tests positive, especially when it's in the form of a blood test, it will be counted as a confirmed case. A positive result from a nucleic acid test should be considered as a confirmed case. But here, as long as there are no symptoms, it won't count as such.
This Wuhan citizen said that many infected people went home and spread the disease to their families. To his knowledge, on Jiyu Qiao Street in Wuhan alone, 7 hotels have been designated to quarantine infected patients. People in Wuhan also believe that the reason for the citywide testing was that there were a lot of inferior quality test kits in stock that were returned to China from various countries, so the authorities had an excuse to use them up and make a fortune. In mid-May, Chinese journalist Zhang Jian told NTD that, under the threat of Wuhan authorities, Wuhan citizens were forced into testing to prove they were healthy.
The recently introduced nucleic acid test, from what I understand, still has to be paid for by people themselves, although the price is a bit lower. Previously, it was 260 yuan, $36.50. Now it is 180 yuan, $25.30. For someone who doesn't have a job and has been locked up in the city for months, it's still a number that will make them want to cry.
Zhang Jian was arrested on May 14th on charges of picking quarrels and provoking trouble and is currently being held at Shanghai's Pudong New District Detention Center. In addition to the criticism that the C.C.P. nucleic acid testing was used for fabricating test results and profit-making, the New York Times also questioned how Wuhan managed to test 6.5 million people in 10 days. The May 26th report said the Wuhan laboratories went from processing around 46,000 tests a day on average before the drive to as many as 1.47 million tests on Friday. By comparison, the state of New York has tested 1.7 million people since March 4th, according to the Atlantic's COVID tracking project. Jing Dongyan, a virologist at the University of Hong Kong, told the New York Times it would be impossible to accurately test that many people in such a short period. Under ordinary circumstances, nucleic acid tests for the coronavirus are difficult to administer in hospitals, even with well-trained nurses. Trying to conduct so many of them in quick succession in makeshift testing tents could produce many erroneous results. Nevertheless, the Wuhan government warned residents who refused to be tested that their health codes would be lowered, which would affect their work and travel.
Everyone has to go. If you don't, you won't be able to enter your residential neighborhood. You have to swipe your health code to get in and out of your neighborhood. When conducting the test, the doctor simply takes several cotton swabs, tap them a few times in your throat, wipe your mouth, and it's done. Of course, the result won't be very accurate. What's the point of the test if you test like this?
A video has been circulating online that shows a woman in Wuhan taking a nucleic acid test while angrily rebuking the government for its decision to test 11 million people in 10 days and disregarding the lives and deaths of the people.
What are you going to do if people get cross-infected in the middle of this testing process? During the test, don't you have to open your mouth? Don't you have to take the mask off? How can the medical staff go about changing their masks and gloves in such a short period of time? How do you guarantee disinfection procedures?
Yang Zhangqin, a former senior mainland NGO member, criticized the C.C.P. for being opaque on all fronts, but exploiting political power to force the public into testing, which has inadvertently increased the risk of people being infected.
Where did those testing kits come from? Are they effective? What is the accuracy rate? Also, do you know how the samples are processed after the test? A lot of people in Wuhan were asked to test in groups. A lot of people crammed together. Some of the samples were then put together in a single bottle with no label on it. No labels at all. This kind of activity to complete a political agenda is nothing more than a farce.
Several advocates of large-scale screenings also acknowledge that the real value of the screening lies less in medicine than in psychology. However, there are also people who say that the screening results are only temporary and don't provide a lasting sense of security.
Overseas Chinese who plan to fly back to China are finding their flights canceled. The Aviation Administration of the Chinese regime is restricting people from returning to China, leaving citizens feeling abandoned by the country. As Chinese citizens realize governments of other countries are sparing no effort to facilitate their citizens going home, they feel disappointed in the Chinese regime.
A drastic reduction in the number of flights to China and soaring airfares have left Chinese nationals stranded almost in every corner of the world. Zhou Ting, pseudonym, a Chinese intern in Boston, told the Chinese-language Epoch Times that many Chinese have to leave the United States in the summer, but are having great difficulty purchasing air tickets. China's Civil Aviation Administration announced a 5-1 policy on March 29th, which means in each foreign country, any existing Chinese airline is to operate only one route and no more than one flight per week. The original plan was to have the policy in place until May 31st, but China recently extended it to October.
I graduated last year and stayed in the United States on optional practical training, which will end very soon. I did not get selected in the H-1B lottery process, so I must return to China around August. I wasn't worried about air tickets until the 5-1 policy was extended to October. My visa expires in mid-September. By then I must leave. I'm now worried I may not be able to secure a ticket at a reasonable price. I understand all governments don't want to see new cases of infection, nor do they want to have a second wave. But I believe no matter what, you cannot block your own citizens from returning home, right? I feel that in this respect, the current approach is disappointing and inhumane. I understand the government's concerns. They don't want to have more new cases. However, I don't think that the current policy is reasonable. Actually, my situation is not too bad because I have been working in the past year, and I don't need to worry about taking classes or being unable to graduate. I noticed that Chinese students and visiting scholars spent a lot of money to come abroad. If they have to spend tens of thousands of yuan to purchase air tickets, it is a big burden. In comparison, other countries are doing what they can to help their citizens. Of course, they are not offered free tickets, but their governments are genuinely providing some help. I feel that we Chinese are being abandoned. I myself have a job here. Those Chinese students who were asked to leave campus really had a tough time. I know many true stories. Some went to the airport only to find that the flights were cancelled, but they had already terminated their rental leases. In my case, I still have a place to live and I have income. I can manage to live through this period of time. But I am disappointed to see that we Chinese cannot get any help from the government.
The interview was conducted on May 25th by Chen Han of the Chinese-language Epoch Times.
Joshua Phillip, the host of Crossroads, discusses the violence instigated and carried out by Antifa and other similar groups in connection with the rioting we've been seeing lately in many U.S. cities. Many locals and overseas groups, including the C.C.P., seem to be connected and in some way contribute to the riots we're now witnessing.
Was this event tied to the Chinese Communist Party's open call to 230 international socialist movements to use the coronavirus to push for political gains? An important bit of history here. This wasn't too long ago, in fact. Chinese Communist Party rallies 230 leftist parties to exploit C.C.P. virus for political gains. This is an article in the Epoch Times, again from Trevor Loudon. Now, he notes an open letter published on April 2nd by the International Department of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China. Now, the Chinese Communist regime called for, quote, coordinated policies and, quote, mobilization of resources and forces globally. Now, among these global communist movements are the Cuban Communist Party, other major communist parties, but also some that are not in power, such as the Communist Party of Britain and the Communist Party USA. Now note that many communist newspapers and publications also push this letter. This suggests that many communist and socialist movements may have received the Chinese Communist Party's call to action, a call to action very similar to what we may be seeing now. Now let's look at another tweet. This is from Emmy Award-winning former senior news correspondent Adam Housley, saying that, quote, more from my intel source, Russia is part of this, but the scope of the cyber ops being done by China right now is staggering. They are also using surrogates in Venezuela and Cuba and a few other friendly areas. And let's elaborate on that a bit. Now, we saw that among the signatories on this open letter from the Chinese Communist Party, calling for global mobilization of all these different forces to feed into the Chinese regime's interest. Among them was the Communist Party of Cuba. And according to that individual, we have the communist regime in Cuba being involved in some of the operations right now, as well as the Chinese regime being involved in some of these operations right now. Now, some of the organizations that are involved, some of these revolutionary communist organizations we know are involved based on their tweets, based on their activities and their statements. Some of them have active ties to the Chinese Communist Party. Some of them are directly Maoist organizations. And when it comes to Antifa, and again the designation of Antifa as a terrorist organization, and notably we haven't seen the details on this yet, although Attorney General William Barr did say that the FBI, different task forces on terrorism, are going to start working on these cases. We don't know exactly what they have. We don't know exactly what the criteria will be to identify these Antifa members or Antifa affiliates.
To watch the entire video on Crossroads, please visit the link below. The following charts show you the most recent numbers regarding the C.C.P. virus pandemic. The Chinese Communist Party's cover-up led to a pandemic that now threatens the lives of people around the globe. With over 6.4 million people infected, China is still defensive about independent international inquiry into the origin and spread of the C.C.P. virus. The Epoch Times has initiated a global Sign the Petition campaign calling for investigating, condemning, and rejecting the C.C.P. We believe that investigating and exposing the truth is the only way that we can remain safe. Let's take action. Sign the petition at ccpvirustruth.com. That's all for today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this program with friends and family to keep them informed about the latest news and updates. Thank you for joining me. See you next time.